Okay, we are up and running if you would like to start.
I think we start officially with the statement from the board clerk.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I would like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to the Brown Act waivers provided for under the Governor's Executive Order in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. A few housekeeping items for board members. Please mute your microphones following roll call until it is your turn to speak and keep them muted. To indicate you have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and Chair Miller will announce you before you speak. Please unraise your hand when you no longer have a question. A friendly reminder that all action items this evening will need to be voted on via roll call vote. If you need to leave the meeting early, please notify me via email so that I can accurately reflect this in the minutes. For the members of the public who are joining us via teleconference, if you would like to speak during the public comment period, please use the raise hand function on the bottom of your screens in Zoom, and Chair Miller will announce you before you speak. For members of the public joining only by phone, please send public comments to me at the email address listed on the agenda, and I will read the comment record within the allotted time if received prior to the close of the item. Or you can dial *9 on your phones to initiate the raise hand function in Zoom. If any board members or members of the public are experiencing technical difficulties during this meeting, please email me and I will do my best to resolve. And with that, I turn it over to our chair.
All right, thank you. Okay, with everything going on in the world, I would like to call today's meeting to order in recognition of equality and justice, and in honor of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and all those that have lost their lives and suffered due to racism. I know that as Americans, we can find a way forward together and heal our nation's wounds. I think it's critical that we do not add to those wounds or widen the divide we are seeing across the country. I call on all of you to make your voices and your frustrations heard in nonviolent ways so that we can build on the positive momentum and begin our journey forward. Change depends on each and every one of us. We must take time to listen and to learn. That's how we will make meaningful and substantial progress to eliminate all forms of racism and inequality. And with that, let's go to our roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Miller.
Present.
Vice Chair Smith.
Present.
Gibbons.
Present.
Sinks.
Here.
Tovar.
Here.
Fliger.
Here.
Tyson.
Here.
Rennie.
Here.
Montano.
Here.
Elahi.
Present.
Martinez Beltran.
Here.
Abe Koga.
Here.
Ellenberg.
Here.
Thank you. All are present.
All right, excellent. All right, next up is public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Any member of the public may address the board for up to 3 minutes. If you wish to do so, please raise your hand. I am seeing no hands raised, or *9 if you're on the telephone. Still seeing none. I will look to the board clerk. Have you received any messages?
No messages received.
Okay, then we will move on. Next up is our consent calendar. The consent calendar contains items of routine business that we can take in one motion. I guess let's start with any questions or a motion on the consent calendar.
Move approval on consent.
Second.
So Susan and then Margaret. And then let us check, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to any item on the consent calendar? Press *9 if you're on the phone or raise your virtual hand. Seeing none, I will look to our board clerk for written communication or other communication.
Yes, Chair, we did receive a public comment on item 1C, which is to adopt resolution to authorize the Chief CEO to execute master agreements with Mariposa Energy LLC and BP Energy Company. So this correspondence came in from Kira Barston, and her comment is, hello, for item 1C on the consent calendar, would it be possible to receive clarification on why SVCE would be contracting with the natural gas facility? Natural gas has shown to be dangerous, unhealthy, and a distraction from the transition to renewables. I understand that the context surrounding this agreement may be complicated, so I just want to get a better understanding of what this would mean. Additionally, I am not in support of SVCE doing any business with BP Energy. Regardless of their renewable energy options, BP has caused irreparable harm to this planet and the communities it operates within, both through physical oil spills and more insidious PR campaigns to spread misinformation and climate denial. I would hope that SVCE is looking more broadly at the impacts of its business decisions beyond just procuring energy. It's important to understand the nature of the companies you work with and carefully select who you support. BP is not a company that should be supported in any way, shape, or form. Thank you. And that concludes the comment from Kira Barston.
It was the public comment. One of our own had raised their hand. Nancy.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to just relay that I had a small change to the minutes of the meeting from last time to clarify that I maybe didn't recommend so much as advise the board about a matter. So the clerk made the correction on the minutes that are posted on the meeting. So I believe just the clarification is that the board is approving the revised minutes with the clarification.
Perfect. Thank you, Nancy. And then I want to look to Gresh if there was anything you wanted to say about our natural gas situation.
We'll respond to the person providing the public comment by email. She wanted to have additional information about why we are contracting with Mariposa Energy. But in short, and we'll also be covering this in the IRP proceeding,
Right.
California as a whole is reducing the amount of gas capacity that'll stay online. But the fact is that we will have to have gas units online at least through about 15 more years, with every year having some retirements, and it'll be replaced by cleaner energy. We will follow up with the person making the public comment to talk about both issues. And the second issue in terms of BP Energy, we also have a mandate to keep our costs affordable. And so dealing with as wide a pool of suppliers assures us of getting a lower price. We will discuss both with the person making the public comment.
Perfect. Yeah, all information we as a board have heard before too. So thank you for reiterating for us. Is there any more questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, then we will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Aye.
Gibbons,
Yes.
Sinks,
Aye.
Tovar,
Yes.
Flagger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Yes.
Montano,
Aye.
thank you. Elahi,
Yes.
Martinez Beltran,
Yes.
Abe Koga,
Aye.
Ellenbrook.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, guys. Okay, next up is our CEO report.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the board. I have a few items I'd like to give you an update on. First, I'd like to introduce the newest member of our team, and she will introduce herself too. It's Jessamine Allen. She has some amazing credentials, including a PhD from MIT and a bachelor's and master's degree in astrophysics from UC Berkeley. She will be working in Amy's group on heat waves and AC technology, and I'm going to hand it over to her for her to say a few words about herself and have you welcome her to our team. Jessamine.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. As Garish has mentioned, my background is in basic physics research, and transitioning to the energy sector, I'm really excited to join this community-driven organization. As he said, I'll be helping model future temperature trends associated with climate change and impacts on AC usage in the SVCE territory. And I will also be helping to develop analytic tools and data visualizations of energy usage data to support this organization's decarbonization programs and customer service.
Well, thank you for joining SVCE. We are, crazy is not the right word, but we really are trying hard to change the world. And so that means we've taken some unusual stances and tried to move ahead of others in the state. And we take great pride in being out front. And so I think we're honored to have you on our team now.
Thank you. I'm excited to join.
Thank you, Jessamine. Also wanted to update the board that the customer relief programs that the board has approved related to providing low-income customers a credit on their bills, that was initiated soon after the last board meeting. As of now, 8,200 customers have received the first credit, and credits are going out at about 1,000 a day right now. And that's $50 on their monthly bill, and that'll repeat for another month. The small business letters have also started going out about a week or so ago. The next item is on COVID related to our team and working as a team and working from home. The team continues to work extremely productively, and since they have their work equipment with them all the time, so there's even through the weekends, etc., there's a lot of work being done. One of the things we are going to do is we're going to continue having work from home being the primary mode of working through the end of December, and then through more on a scenario basis or exception basis, we will have people who need to come into the office for specific tasks come in, but that will be under specific written protocols that we will be monitoring. In the meantime, we are planning a face-to-face meeting for the entire group, but we'll be doing it in a park for just an hour or two. It's mostly social, so we just get to see each other, and we'll still be keeping our safe distances from each other, but we would like to just see each other at least once a month, so we'll be doing that. Last, I'd like to give you an update. It's not so good news, but it is good news also for one person, not so good news for the rest of the team. Some of you know that my CFO, my right-hand man, Don Eckert, has been with the organization from our early days and has steered it through some rocky times and been a real resource in SVCE's continuing success. Well, he has got a promotion, so to speak. He's going to be a CEO for another CCA, and I'm going to turn it over to Don to kind of have him give you his news himself. And then since this is the last board meeting he would attend, we will have another event for him before he leaves, and we'll invite you all to that. But this is the last public meeting he'll be at, so I wanted to take the opportunity to have the board also recognize him. So Don?
Thank you, Girish. I'm not supposed to feel emotions as the finance guy, but this is tough. Thank you again for that introduction, Girish, and the update. So it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to work with Girish and his vision and leadership and this incredible SVCE staff with their intelligence and ambition and all the great things that SVCE has accomplished and will continue to accomplish. And I also want to thank this board for your always staying on the mission and the vision of SVCE and never losing sight of what we're here for and making decisions that are in the best interests of our ratepayers and the longevity of this agency. So I can't think of a better group to be working with and a better board to serve. So thank you again for so much. And it's just been just a wonderful experience. And I will be going to Pioneer Community Energy, and I look to take a lot of the skills that we've learned here at SVCE and see what we can apply there as well. But thank you all again.
What's Pioneer's boundaries, Don?
Yeah, so it's around the Auburn, Rockland area, and I've got it has a pretty large area service area, but it's about maybe a third of the accounts.
Right. So I want to make two comments, and then there's a bunch of other people that will. First, you've been here since the beginning, and we never really had bumpy times, but when you launch a rocket ship, it makes a lot of noise and it shakes a whole bunch, and you worry about it blowing up. So you survived and helped us through that, and that was wonderful. And the second thing, which is not lost on me, we're #1 in training new CEOs for other CCAs in the state. Not necessarily the best distinction, but something to be proud of. So it will be good to have another compadre in the state who has roots here in Silicon Valley. So I'm going to just go in the order you guys raised your hand. So Rob, you're first, and then Margaret, and then Liz.
Well, you stole a little bit of my thunder, Howard. Of course, I want to congratulate Don, but it wasn't mentioned that he was probably employee #2 or #3. He's really a founding member that's been here that, got us through the whole startup. And, being the finance guy when you're starting up with no money, right? That you got to figure out the whole business plan to start with, and make us get through when you don't have any cash yet. And so, Don really deserves a big hand for helping birth this organization. And so again, congratulations on moving on to new and greater things.
Margaret, then Liz.
Well, thank you for helping to birth this organization. And I joined, I guess, a year or two later, and you were always very welcoming, and it's just been a real pleasure working with you, Dawn. I'm going to miss you so much, but I know this is what you were looking for your next stop to be, and so I'm really happy for you. But thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for getting us to our goal of getting a credit rating. That's quite, everything's been quite an accomplishment, but I just want to thank you. It's just been a real joy. I love laughing with you and seeing your smile out in the audience, and I'm really going to miss that. But best wishes to you, and stay in touch. Thanks.
All right, Liz, and then Rod, and then Javed.
Well, to say that this is a bittersweet moment, obviously we're very proud of everything that you've accomplished for us and taking it on to your next adventure. And I can't imagine having been through this organization's beginnings without you and having the success that we've reached. The credit rating and so many financial innovations that you've come up with, and having audits come through so brilliantly, and training the rest of the staff, explaining things, certainly to me. Your patience and depth has been for me, and I'm sure other board members, to our success. And also want to acknowledge you're doing not only the finance director job, but also being interim CEO for a fairly good length of time. You took it all on in stride, and thank you. And you will be missed.
Rod, and then Javed.
Thank you. Don, I really appreciate all that you've done. I won't repeat what everybody has said, but it's also on the top of my mind. And I'll just say that, our CCA has seeded a lot of talent in other CCAs, and this continues that trend, right? Monterey Bay, we lost Tom and our powered guy down there, and now you're going off to Pioneer, and I hope you take our culture and everything you learned about risk management and everything where you're going. I wish you the best of success on that venture. Send us some gold as you mine it and find it, and send us some wind power. Maybe we can do some joint procurement together as we have with Monterey Bay. Good luck to you.
All right. Javed?
Yeah,
I guess I'm the newcomer on the board, or maybe I've been here a year. I really appreciated your taking the time to explain some of the nuances that I couldn't quite get, and also, meeting separately on discussing certain items that needed to be discussed. So I wish you good luck. I'm sure you'll be doing a great job wherever you go, and just make sure if there's some good discounted energy we can buy, you send it to us before you take it. Okay. Thank you. Take care. Good luck.
All right, anybody else wish to? Carmen. I think unmute Carmen, and then you should be able to speak.
My mic on. Okay, just want to say good luck to your new endeavors, your new job, and for the short time that I was here, I really appreciated all your comments. You're a very intelligent person, and we're going to miss you, and I hope that we can find someone to fill your shoes. Thank you for your time and your service and your dedication to this agency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All we need now is a motion to say he can't leave.
I'll second that.
Good
Thank
luck.
you all again so much.
Yeah, good luck with everything, Don.
Thank
and
you, Don.
Thank you so very much.
Good luck, Don.
Chair Miller, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
All right. At this point, let's go to the public, and we will have a little bit of public comment here. So if you wish to comment on the CEO's report, raise your digital hand. If you're on the phone, that can be done by pressing *9. And we are going to start with Bruce.
Hi, everybody. Bruce Carney here. I'd just like to add my thank you to Don Eckert for everything he's done over the years. Of course, as the CFO, he's responsive to the CEO and to the board and the executive committee, but I'd also like to say that he's been very responsive to me and other members of the public, and really shown a sensitivity to the kind of community concerns that renewable energy advocates have shared with him and with other members of the board and the staff. I have no doubt that he'll help lead Pioneer Energy to be equally sensitive to the needs of the community that it serves. And of course, Don, I'm going to miss you, and I hope whoever tries to fill your shoes does half as good a job as you've done over the years. And someday in the future, perhaps we'll be able to share a beer in the Gold Country, and I can learn more about what's going on in your new organization. Best of luck.
Thank you, Bruce. Next up is James. I did it right.
James, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is James. I just wanted to echo, I was going to say exactly what Bruce just said, just another member of the community with the same sentiments. We'll miss you, Don, and really appreciate all your hard work, and congratulations.
Thank you, James. All right, any other member of the public wish to comment? We will check with our clerk. Any other communications received?
No additional public comment received.
Okay, then we are going to move on to item number 3, which is the strategic plan update. And Grish, there you are.
Thank you. Andrea is going to put up our slides. This is going to be a relatively short presentation. I wanted to give the board an update on our strategic plan. Next slide, please. So this is a mission statement. Just kind of broke it up, color-coded it. Obviously, it's reduce dependence on fossil fuels by doing a few things. It's providing electricity that's carbon-free and providing it in an affordable and reliable manner. And secondly, is to provide innovative programs for the SVCE community. Next slide. So I wanted to frame these two different parts of our mission statement. In terms of electricity, of buying and building new electricity sources, that's the most expensive and it's very complex. But it's mostly, and it's about 90% of our budget is focused towards this. But it's also, a lot of it is mandatory. There's a lot of regulatory oversight, and there are also roadmaps on how we get there, roadmaps to the year 2030 and roadmaps to the year 2045. So it's the core part of our business, but it's also very regulated. However, programs, it's just 2% of our business, highly discretionary, but it has the most potential to move the carbon curve downward. And we'll talk about this also in the next presentation on the integrated resource plan. Next slide. So since we started, we have adopted a strategic plan very early since we were formed in the first year, just a few months after we started serving electricity. And we've updated our strategic plan 3 times since. And a strategic plan ought to be kind of a living document that is updated in response to what's happening out in the marketplace. And that's what you've done as a board. So we've had updates in 2018, 2 updates. And the 2018 December update was a major one because that's when we adopted our decarbonization plan. And in item 7 today, you'll be hearing from Amy and Don Bray about all the very cool programs that we have launched and what we plan to do also in the future. In 2019, we also updated in response to what the marketplace was showing us. And you see this in the slide as to what the updates were. You also directed me to shorten that strategic plan because the strategic plan, when we first developed it, it had high-level policy items in it, but it also had a lot of what I call work plan items in it. And we've been around more than 3 years now, and we thought, all right, and you asked me to shorten this too. So that's one of the goals of what we're trying to do this year. Next slide. In the essence of a strategic plan, the plan itself is just a document, right? But it's the board and staff working together to identify strategic issues and figure out whether we need to adapt or change the direction that we're headed. In the last 12 months, the board has engaged in quite a bit of discussion and providing us direction in response to different threats, opportunities in our business. So in the June to August timeframe of last year, when we present the budget to you, we go through identification of risks, and we also provide you a 5-year forecast of our finances. So not only are you looking at the current state and the prompt 12 months, you're also looking at 5 years. Between September and February, we had 4 meetings and workshops where we talked about our clean energy future and our clean energy future going out to 2030 and beyond. I've added a few slides as reference slides in the presentation that would remind members of the public and others who are interested about the things that we're talking about. So I'm connecting this to the budget, right? So it's 90% of our budget is on power supply, and you've spent quite a bit of time giving a direction on our future power supply. Most recently, when we had our rate update, we also incorporated changes related to our load reduction due to COVID, the different changes in the PCIA estimates, and adjusted our rates accordingly. So you've done quite a bit in terms of working on strategic issues over the last 12 months. Next slide. So this is a slide that you've seen before. It basically shows over about a 12-month period, the different points of entry that the board has to direct staff to basically change direction or get involved and be engaged in strategic issues. You set the CEO priorities typically somewhere in the summer period. So that's a way for you to ensure that we're heading in the right direction. The budget is another opportunity for you to do that, and you did that in the adoption of the FY20 budget. We presented to you in January of this year our staff work plan. The mid-year budget and updated rates we had in April. You talked about it again, and right now in the next quarter, we're going to update the document itself and present it to you in September. You'll also have a chance to make sure that your strategic goals that you have for the organization and for me are embedded in the goals you set for me through my annual evaluation. Next slide. The timeline to update our plan is through the May through July timeframe. We are going to move the detailed tactics that are in our strategic plan. We'll move it into our work plan. We'll update what we call, the SWOT analysis, best analysis, basically looking at doing an environmental scan and seeing, all right, our strategies aligned with addressing the threats and opportunities that face us. We'll present this to the executive committee at a special meeting at the end of July or beginning of August, and then present it to you in August, receive your comments, and then ask for your approval for adoption at the September meeting along with adoption of the budget. So those are next steps, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have on the process. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, there'll be one more opportunity. Let me go to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to make a comment on this item? Raise your virtual hand, and if you're on the phone, you can do that by pressing *9. Okay, I'm seeing no members of the public. I will come back. We will check with the board clerk. Did she receive any comments?
No comments received for this item.
All right. Are there any comments or questions from any board member? Okay, seeing none. We have, if you follow this in a lot of detail, we have this very tightly coupled strategic plan, and this organization does a good job of aligning the review of the CEO with the dates and the finances, so everything lines up so that we get everybody on the same page at the same time. So I think that's one of the tricks, one of the secret learnings. Where's Don, right? Take that one with you to Pioneer. One of the secret tricks of our organization is we are constantly making sure we've aligned our strategic goals with our CEO's goals with our financial plans. And with that, I think we're just going to call that item done. Thank you, Girish. Next up is a more elaborate discussion, but our integrated resource planning. And I think Monica is going to help us with that.
I think I'll take a few slides. This is a last minute change, Howard, that I'll take a few of the first slides and then hand it over to Monica. So this is the purpose of our presentation. It's to inform you of next steps required to file this compliance document that we call the Integrated Resource Plan. We have to do this every 2 years, and we will be bringing it to you for approval in August. And we wanted to give you context on this. And if you can go to the next slide. So before we get into explaining the slide, I'll tell you a little bit. This compliance document that we have to file is very complex. It's very technical. So there's a lot of things, I'd say, the things that we have to do, the what's. But we wanted to step back for the board and talk about the why. Why do we need to do this integrated resource plan? I mean, you step back, we wanted to frame it as the integrated resource plan is just one piece of it. The next 3 slides, this and the next 2, I hope will provide you context, not just for your role at the SVCE board, but also in your roles in regional committees like ABAG, MTC, and your own cities. When you look at climate change and the actions you can take to influence climate change, reducing emissions. And so this slide this shows California's emission targets through the year 2050. So this is the state as a whole. This is not just electricity. It's electricity, it's natural gas, it's industrial use, it's agricultural use, it's transportation. It's what California as a whole through AB 32 has committed to do. So big picture, each of your cities, counties, all of us in the state are basically regulated in one form or the other. And this is the trend line that California has to achieve. So over here, I want to point out a few targets. We have a target in 2030 where we have to have emissions being 40% below 1990 levels. Now, after AB 32 was passed, we had another law passed called SB 100, which was associated with the electric sector. So let me go to the next slide. So this is the same slide as the previous one, but it shows how much of a reduction the electricity sector has to provide in these economy-wide emission reductions. So if you focus on the year 2030, and if you go to the middle of the chart, the green dot, and if you go to the y-axis, it shows it's about 260 million tons of CO2 are the total emissions allowed in California for the entire economy. So that's the target in 2030. And you can see from that dotted line, there's going to be quite a reduction needed from 2020 to 2030. So the green dot is the total emissions for the economy as a whole. And the contribution of electricity emissions of that target are the two reddish dots down below. And those sum up to 46 million and 38 million tons of emissions would be allowed in the electric sector. So this provides context for us, what part the electric sector plays in these 2030 goals. So who else plays a part here? Next slide. So on the right-hand side, this pie chart shows the total emissions in 2017 for the economy as a whole. So you see electricity is only about 15% of the total emissions. The rest of the emissions comes from other sectors of the economy. So to put this in context, the transportation side has a lot and the building side has a lot. So connecting this also to the strategic plan update that we provided earlier, the electric sector is highly regulated and we have goals for 2030 and 2045 of how we get there. The item that you're going to be listening to after this one is actually, actions we'll be taking, basically buying a lot of renewable power, basically gets us to reducing the electric sector emissions. But there's a lot more we have to do on the transportation and industrial side too. So this IRP is essentially the state's way of saying the electricity sector, as you are reducing your emissions, here's how we want you to do it. So they give us some very detailed instructions on exactly what we need to do to get to that 2030 goal. But I want you all to keep in mind, obviously, that this is one part of the bigger picture. And I know that many of you serve on a variety of committees and regional organizations where you get to influence actions that will be taken on other sectors of the economy too. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Monica, who will explain what part the IRP plays in getting our emissions down.
Grish, before we move on, let me just ask the board, is there anybody who has any questions at this point? I'm not seeing any, so Monica, we'll move on.
Okay, so taking it from where Garish left off, next slide, Andrea. So through the integrated resource planning process, which is a mandated process that we have to go through every other year, the CPUC, or that is the state, established these two targets of reductions in greenhouse gas emission associated with the electricity sector. So again, we have the 46 million metric ton scenario, which is a more, I guess, conservative target. And then to get us to this greater or more aggressive goal of zero carbon by 2045, they also established a 38 million metric ton scenario, which is the additional amount of reductions needed to get to that 2045 goal. Next slide. So what that means for us. So basically they take that emission target for the electricity sector and they provide a pro rata share of that to each of the different load serving entities in California that are under the CPUC's jurisdiction. So for SVCE, that represents about, for the 46 million metric ton scenario, about 8.14 MMTs by 2030, or in the more aggressive scenario, 0.673 MMTs. So that's kind of our target, if you want to put it that way. That's what we're trying to reduce our electricity emissions to by 2030. Next slide. So what does that mean? So this graph is a little bit complicated, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. I did not create this. Hillary, who is my colleague, created this, and so she's on board if we need to ask any detailed questions. But essentially, you've got the two scenarios. So the stack bar chart on the left-hand side represents the 46 MMT scenario, and the stack bar on the right represents the more aggressive scenario. And so the difference there represents the amount of new renewable resources that would need to get built between now and 2030 in order to meet the different emission targets. So the main thing to point out here is that it's going to require a whole lot of new build, including a lot of solar plus storage, but more importantly, a lot of wind. And so you could see there that that's the big driver between the two scenarios, is the amount of additional wind, both in-state and out of state, that would need to be built between now and 2030 to get to these targets. Next slide. So what does that mean for SVCE? So this table here represents basically the amount of additional new generation capacity that we would need to put in place by 2030 to meet that more aggressive goal. And so the column in the middle, the one that reads capacity currently contracted for in 2030, this is all of the capacity or all of the contracts that we've signed to date. And so so in total, we've signed quite a bit. You can see there alone with solar, it's 333 megawatts, geothermal 36 megawatts, and 4 hours battery storage 95 megawatts. And so the column to the right shows the additional amount of capacity that we would have to add if we were to get to that 38 MMT based on the way that the CPUC thinks that we need to get there. So they ran their sophisticated models and decided that these are the resources and the amount of capacity that makes most sense for load serving entities like us to put in place between now and 2030. So here, the items highlighted in green basically show that we've pretty much met or exceeded the target. And the one shown in salmon color shows where we're quite deficient in terms of meeting what the state thinks we should be pursuing to get to this very aggressive reduction target. So again, what does that mean for us? Well, it means for us that we have, in addition to all the procurement that we've already done, we need to focus our efforts on trying to procure some additional and different types of resources, including long duration storage, wind, large hydro, and this resource called shed demand or distributed energy resources. So this is getting energy and capacity from our customers. Next slide. The other interesting or important thing that we need to address in context of the IRP, not just how we're going to reduce emissions, but how we're going to do this while also meeting the liability requirements that the state has. So with all of this intermittent renewable resources like solar and wind coming online and even storage, there's definitely going to be a need for some upgrades to the system, but also retention of some of the existing fleet that is natural gas fleet, so that we continue to ensure that electricity and the lights stay on 24/7, because that's the #1 goal of the Cal ISO and also the state, is to make sure that we have electricity there, whether it's clean or not, but that we have electricity available. So right now, 60% of all resource adequacy or capacity fleet in California, and perhaps the most hottest or the highest demand month of the year, September, comes from natural gas. The rest of it is coming from other resources like some coal, some hydro, some renewable resources, and even some nuclear. So for SVCE currently, we only contract through short-term transactions for resource adequacy because our resources aren't online yet. So right now, 100% of our resource adequacy or reliability contributions to the grid are being met through natural gas resources. But in the future, as we add more and more clean resources and storage to go with those clean resources, we expect our contribution of our resource adequacy to be essentially 30% from clean resources. And then we'll also continue to evaluate and promote demand response for resource adequacy. And you'll hear a little bit about that later today from Amy. Next slide. So we have these kind of competing directives or challenges in developing the IRP. One is what the California state has told us that they think we need to be procuring in order to meet these really aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goals and reliability on the grid. And the other is what we plan to do and what our board and community has directed us to do in terms of achieving greenhouse gas reductions, which by the way are essentially zero since we're a carbon-free CCA. That is our target, is to be at zero MMT for electricity sector. So we have to kind of balance the two of those. We want to make sure that whatever we put forward in the IRP and submit to the CPUC is something that they will approve and that they see has real credibility in terms of being able to implement it and meet their goals. Next slide. So what have we been looking at in terms of portfolios for SVCE? And we've shared this many times with the board in different kind of formats and versions, and we've iterated on it every time that we get a new requirement or a new reporting mandate from the CPUC. So, but for now, just to simply show you what we're thinking or where we're at, again, we're gonna have to submit 2 portfolios called conforming portfolios to the CPUC that represent SVCE getting to that 46 MMT and that 38 target. So those are mandatory. And so what we've done there is we've taken all of the PPAs that we've executed, all the resources that we've contracted for, and we've scaled them to represent or to reflect what is in the CPUC's plan for us in terms of what resources, that going back to that table which showed how much more capacity we have to add by each resource. These 2 portfolios are intended by design to meet these greenhouse gas reduction and SVCE specific greenhouse gas benchmark in 2030. And then we looked at our current plan, that is our current board approved policy, which is essentially 100% carbon free and includes an aggressive RPS between now and 2025 that is higher than the state's minimum RPS, and then gradually increasing to 60% by 2030, and much of that coming from long-term resources, or some of that coming from long-term resources. And in our case, it would be a little more than what's required by the state. And then lastly, we also evaluated a high RPS procurement portfolio. We did this because we wanted to see, like, if we pushed the envelope and not just stopped at 60% RPS by 2030, but really wanted to kind of get to that additionality that SVCE so much wants to do, and we pushed it all the way to 75% RPS by 2030, much more than what the state is asking for from us. What would that do? What would that look like? What would that look like in terms of cost to our ratepayers and in terms of reliability and of course greenhouse gas emissions? And so it's an interesting portfolio. It's one that we will probably continue to evaluate and maybe even consider in the future in terms of IRP or bringing it to the board. But for now, we're going to recommend as an alternative to the state's conforming portfolios, the current plan, which is 100% clean and 60% RPS by 2030. Next slide. So then we get into the nitty-gritty of what we're actually going to be submitting. So the document itself that we need to submit to the CPUC is quite involved. It's a big, long narrative of what we've done, what we plan to do, what we evaluated, all these different elements that we need to consider. Did we look at risk? Did we look at curtailment? Did we look at local air pollutants? So the document is in the process of being written, and Hillary is taking the lead on writing that document, and you'll see that soon enough in August. But one of the interesting, or the more, I guess, useful parts of this plan is going to be the action plan. And that's going to lay out what we will be doing between now and the next time we have to do an IRP. So it's going to talk about all the planning, all the evaluation, all the procurement that we're going to do to get to those 2030 greenhouse gas emission targets. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, we're not done yet. So like I mentioned, we're writing the report, we're filling out the templates, and in August, we will bring to you the IRP in its final form for approval, and then we will submit it to the CPUC in September and wait for approval from them. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, happy to answer them or direct them to the appropriate staff.
Excellent report. Rob Rennie's hand went up early. Rob, what do you got?
You know, I have seen this presentation, but it dawned on me, and I didn't think to ask before, that the state actually was talking about more wind than solar going in. If you remember that slide back that you were showing, 235 million, whatever the number, the units are. It seems like we've had challenges getting any wind. We've done RFPs for wind. We had one that we thought we won, and then they couldn't, they can't execute. We don't know when they're going to execute. We've had other wind RFPs where we couldn't make any deals, or they couldn't execute. It just seems like wind has a challenge. Is something going to change in the state that wind has less of a challenge, and that's actually going to happen? And how much are we planning to beat our head on the wind thing when it seems like it's gone nowhere so far? I realize it's some component now, but the fact that it's even going to be more than solar sounds great, but is it realistic by 2030?
Yeah, so that's the graph that I showed the additional new capacity that needs to be added, not the total. But yes, you're right in terms of your comments about wind being a challenge to obtain. And, you know, like in our last RFO, we tried to buy it. We consistently are in the market looking for projects that we know are in development. And so part of our narrative that we submit to the CPUC, when we compare our portfolio to the conforming portfolios that they're asking us to look at, will be our real life experience in trying to procure this stuff. And we will be very honest about how difficult it is to procure. It's not that we're not trying to procure. In fact, we would love to have wind for its diversity characteristics, especially out of state wind. It's just the market's not there. And so that's going to be part of our narrative. And the CPUC, I think, is going to hear more and more about that from other load serving entities as well. And that's part of their process. So they're going to get this information and iterate on it. In the next IRP, they're going to have to incorporate more and more about what we're learning in real life. Geothermal is another really good example. They have no new geothermal in their conforming portfolios, whereas we found it, and we found it to be a very good resource and very cost-effective resource for our needs and also for reliability. And so there's kind of a loop here that is continuously being updated in the market and the regulators and us buyers.
And sort of a follow-on to that, so we're working with the PUC, which is not the lawmakers in the state. Some of the challenge on wind seems that you said there isn't the market for it, but I think there's some regulatory challenges that if the state really wants us to get there, might need to be addressed at the legislature. Do you think there'll be some feedback from the PUC that makes it to the legislature?
Well, I'm not sure I know exactly, but if it's like getting environmental permits because of siting and concerns about the birds, then yeah, I don't know how they close that gap. There definitely is an issue in permitting. And then the other big one is out of state, right? So there's a lot of capacity that they're counting on in terms of out of state wind. coming from not existing projects, but ones which require a new transmission build. And that in itself is a challenge. It's a very big challenge. And the state of California has no control over how transmission gets built outside of California. And so it is, again, it's an iterative process with a loop where we get to tell them what we've seen in reality, and then hopefully it gets integrated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's bats now, Monica, not birds.
Oh, bats?
Yeah.
We like
Well,
bats.
migratory bat paths through Arizona and New Mexico that are impacted by the larger style turbines. So the larger helps birds but hurts bats. Anyway, you know there's always another issue. Okay, is there any other member of the board? Nancy, did you want to say something? Okay, we have a member of the public, so let me go to the public and then I'll come back if anybody's got follow-up questions or comments. So we're going to start with, first, if anybody'd like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And if you're on the phone, that can be done by pressing *9. So we're going to start with Bruce.
Hi, thanks very much. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Super. So I'd like to start by just, thanking Monica and other members of the staff for, taking a very clear-eyed look at what the state is trying to accomplish and how SVCE can lead the way to accomplishing that. I'm older than most of the board and all of the staff. I'm 67. And so when I first came to California, I was 17 years old in 1970, and I attended college in Claremont, California. And when I arrived, the older students told me that there was a large mountain range called the San Gabriel Mountains, just a few miles from Claremont. And of course, I said that can't be true because if it were there, I could see it. And I couldn't see it because the smog in 1970 in the San Gabriel Valley was so appalling that the mountains were invisible. And then one day a wind came by, and sure enough, there was a 10,000-foot mountain 5 miles from my dorm. When I moved to this area and attended Stanford, the smog was so thick that you couldn't see the East Bay Hills many days in the summer. So I'm very, very proud of California and SVCE for what they're trying to accomplish. And I want you to do whatever it takes to succeed. And if that actually involves raising the price of electricity above what smoggy PG&E charges for their electricity, I'm okay with that. And I understand how challenging that could be for folks in Gilroy or Morgan Hill or other parts of the county that aren't as prosperous as Mountain View. I'd also like to say that I'm aware of the mismatch between the time of use energy prices for electricity right now and what they need to be. So for example, the cheapest electricity I can buy occurs before 10 a.m. in the morning. Between 10 and 1, it gets a little more expensive. Than after 1 p.m., it gets very expensive. Yet the energy at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. is the cleanest in terms of environmental pollution. It's mostly solar at that time, but we have to pay, premium dollar for that. So that's something that needs to change. So, just to close, and I want to thank staff. I want to encourage them to be bold, to look at the most challenging goals that the state or the CPUC or SVCE itself is setting out, and finding a way to achieve those goals. I will certainly support whatever it takes to clean up the energy supply. And thanks very much for all your efforts.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I had a job offer in Los Angeles in 1985, and they said, "Oh yeah, during part of the year you can see the mountains." And I had the same experience here in Silicon Valley, and I'm proud of what the Air District has done. Now we just need to get them to ban diesel trucks and gas automobiles. We'd be in great shape. And just everybody knows, but I'll just remind everybody, at least in our area, PG&E is changing the rate structure in October. I believe that's still their plan of action, and the expensive electricity is now going to better match the market. So from 4 to 9 or something. All right, we have some more. Let me just double check. Any other member of the public wish to speak on this item? I'm not seeing any hands there. Let me check with our board clerk.
No additional comments.
Okay, perfect. And I'll come back to us. Liz has raised her hand. Liz, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Monica and Hillary and others who put the presentation together. It was, for me, a really excellent condensation of a lot of presentations that we've had. It had continuity, and I could easily comprehend it. It told a good story. So as we go forward and you prepare the documents, coming back to this as an appendix or something in your presentations, I just found it very helpful. So thank you for making that clarity for all of us.
Okay, are there any other, Garish?
Yeah, I didn't see any other hands from the board being raised, so I just wanted to also acknowledge the team behind putting this work together. Start off with Hillary. She put together most of the presentation, and she is managing this project for us. We also have Eric and Ian on Monica's team, and Amy and Rebecca from Amy's team helping with the load forecast. And then we also use our consultant, Ascend, to run the model. So I probably missed out. There's a lot. Everyone has some part in it, but just it's a big team effort. And wanted to thank all the staff for working on it. That's it, Howard.
Yeah, I'm going to thank everybody too, including you, Garish, but the whole staff as well. And I will point out for the newer board members, there's a challenge in this process. We will do accurate and honest work, but my experience with the CPUC and their review of these has not been positive yet. So I could see them complaining about some I or some T that we didn't properly dot or cross. So with all the precision that staff is putting in, I really want to thank you guys. And I just want to remind everybody, it's not a slam dunk. There may be some comments that we may not be super happy to hear about, but at least we're working hard and telling the truth. And so I really thank staff for digging into this. And that is what we have on that. So let's move on to the next item, which is actually getting more power. So we're going to authorize the CEO to execute a 20-year power procurement agreement. And this is also Monica.
Yes, Monica plus a team. So in the same vein as Garish and everybody acknowledging staff, this effort to get this PPA was a joint effort with Monterey Bay Community Power. And if you recall, Dennis Deschanel, he was part of that team. He and I leading the team. And then from our team at SVCE, I had Ian Williams, our Manager of Power Resources, and Eric Kim, our Power Resource Planner, as part of this team. And then, of course, we had outside consultants and legal support. So it's been quite an effort. This is the last one I'm bringing to you out of this RFP. So that's why I'm making the big to-do about this. But next slide. Oh, sorry, back slide. Sorry, I'll use this one. So tonight we're here to ask for a delegation of authority to the CEO to execute a 20-year power purchase agreement with 8-Minute Solar Energy, the LLC being 91MC8ME, otherwise known as Aratina, for renewable solar PV with energy storage, also as a PCC1 resource. So next slide. So if you recall, you've seen this slide a few times, but we issued an RFO back in spring of 2019. Our goal was to get about 26% of our long-term energy needs from renewables for compliance period 4 locked in. These are contracts of 10 years or greater. This is a mandate that we do this, but it's also good business practice to get these types of renewable projects in our portfolio since they tend to do very well. It's been a lengthy process, again, starting back in April 2019, bringing us to now where we are actually at the finish line negotiating our 5th PPA, and that would be for Aratina. But before that, we brought 4 other PPAs to the board for approval out of this RFO. Next slide. So this is a summary of the PPAs that you approved through the 2019 RFP. Again, 2 geothermal ones, 3 solar plus storage. The Aretina would be the 4th solar plus storage. And then we have an additional one that we had hoped to bring to you in this month as well, but had a delay with the interconnection process and therefore the potential start date. So we hope that it's something that we could still consider later this year. But as of now, we're basically no longer negotiating under the 2019 RFP. So when all is said and done, we will have negotiated enough PPAs to get to about 26% of our load, but probably only executing to get to about 25%. Next slide. So the Aretina PPA specifically, again, is with 8-Minute Energy Solar Energy. It's a PCC1 resource, meaning that it's a bucket 1 or the premier types of renewable energy that we'd like to put in our portfolio. And it will have some resource adequacy associated with it. So this is some of that clean reliability product that we talked about earlier in the IRP that we're trying to add as much as possible to eliminate the natural gas stuff. The project name, the legal project name is Aretina Solar Center 1B. Monterey got 1A, so combined, it's a combined project. It's a 20-year PPA with an expected start date of June 30th, 2023, and it's located in the Central Valley in Kern County. So it will be a neighbor to some of our other projects. Our share of the contract capacity is going to be 80 megawatts of solar with 20 megawatts of battery. This is lithium-ion battery, and it's a 3-hour discharge battery. All total, it'll add about 6.6% of our, it'll meet 6.6% of our annual retail sales needs or RPS needs. And it is given to us we'll sign it under a fixed price contract. And in terms of dollar per megawatt hours for the PV and $1 per kW month for the battery with no escalator. The authority that we're asking would be to not exceed $174 million over the life of the PPA. Next slide. So where does that get us in terms of meeting our long-term state mandates for RPS resources? So line 3, again, our requirement per compliance period, starting with the first compliance period, which is called compliance period number 4, but it goes from 2021 to 2024, is to have at least 26% of our RPS under long-term contracts. We're currently at 23%, and with the Aretina project, we'll be at 25%. And then you can see where we'll be for the next 2 compliance periods. So it gets us slightly below the minimum requirement. Next slide. This slide here shows, again, just the magnitude of the PPAs that we negotiated and tried to bring to you, and for the most part, you executed under this RFP. So again, 26% of our load. That assumes the last solar plus storage gets approved as well at some point, with a lifetime nominal cost of about $775 million. Representing about 20% of our supply costs on an annual basis as well. Next slide. And this is a summary of all of the PPAs that we have executed and that are still active and will come online at some point between 2021 and 2023. So you can see we have quite a bit of capacity under contract, a total of 384 megawatts coming from 7 projects, representing about 37% of our load on an annual basis. And that's pretty good because you recall our RPS target is about 50 to 52% annually. So it gets us quite a bit there with these long-term resources. So the other stuff, we'll fill in with some additional PPAs versus short-term purchases. But all in all, we've negotiated over $1 billion worth of PPAs. And you can double that if you include the stuff that we negotiated with Monterey as well, since they're, for the most part, taking about 50%. So it's quite a bit of work that we've done the last couple of years. And we're not done. Again, we have an RFO out with them right now. It's a joint RFO between Monterey and Silicon Valley Clean Energy. The RFO was released at the end of April with proposals due June 15, 2020. And through this effort, we hope to bring at least 2 or 3 additional PPAs. Fingers crossed we get a wind one, that makes sense. And So we hope to bring those to the board for consideration at the end of this year. Next slide. So once again, here's our request tonight. It's to authorize the CEO to execute the Aratina solar plus storage PPA as provided for on this slide. That's all I have, if there's any questions.
Yeah, I don't have any question about this one per se. Good job is all I really have to say. But I'm wondering with the push from the state, is the RFO restricted to wind only, or is it just open and we will evaluate the projects as they come?
Yeah, we're technology agnostic, so we will evaluate all offers. But we have indicated that we will give, when doing our evaluation and our ranking of the offers that we receive, that we will give bonus for certain different characteristics, including when they come online. We want projects that can come online sooner. Their ability to deliver carbon-free resources on a more kind of baseload manner, so 24/7, as opposed to just in the afternoon hours. And then diversification to our existing portfolio for both location, supplier, and technology. So while we probably will see some really good solar plus storage projects, I think diversification of the portfolio is a really important thing to try to pursue from a risk management standpoint.
Yeah, okay. Well, some of us love the geo projects. Javed, you have some questions.
Yeah, I would like to see a chart basically comparing the costs of the different resources that we're looking at.
Sure, that's something that you can view via the clerk's office, via Andrea. But the information related to prices retained as confidential, so we can't share it publicly.
Yeah, no, I don't need public information. Some of it may just be an estimate in the future. There may be public records. Some of it might be because of, and it may not be easy to estimate it. So I suppose you have to put in some of your workflow and work process into coming up with the numbers. So if Andrea could send that as an email or something, that would be helpful.
I will check with Andrea and our general counsel on what we can provide.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, there is a way to get not just an estimate, but all the real numbers, and you can look at how everything fits together. Are there other questions? Seeing none, let me go to the public, who I am sure is excited that we are adding more renewables to our portfolio. And for those who are keeping track, I actually think it's a big deal that we're crossing $1 billion tonight. But anyway, any member of the public that wishes to speak on this item? I am seeing none. Let me check with the clerk. Did we get any written or other?
No public comment received.
All right, so I come back to us. This is an action item, but if there are any other questions or discussion, we can do that first. Seeing none.
I move the item.
Item 5.
Second.
So that was Liz and Nancy. Are there any other questions? Let me just thank staff who's been working this RFO now for 2 years and have harvested a whole great set of projects for us. And I'm proud of the work that we've done. And again, you guys, $1 billion, we just passed $1 billion. That's a big deal.
Howard, you gotta go like this.
Yay!
Yeah, okay. I don't know. The county people, they do $1 billion all the time, but us little tiny cities, $1 billion.
Those billions are disappearing fast these days.
I know.
You ain't kidding.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I think we are ready for a roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair Miller,
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Spinks,
Yes, and I'll simply add that I'm looking for diversity and wind in one of our very near next contracts in the next cycle. Thank you.
Tovar,
Yes.
Liger,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Rennie,
Yes.
Montano,
Yes.
Elahi,
Good voice.
Elahi,
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I got it. Thank you so much. Martinez Beltran?
Yes.
Thank you. Abe Koga?
Aye.
Ellenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you guys. And thank you staff. Again, I'm telling you, $1 billion, $1 billion. That's going to my city tonight. Okay, next up, item 6. Delegate authority to the executive committee for some contract stuff. So who is this? Amy. There you are, Amy.
Hi, good evening. Are you able to hear me?
Oh, perfectly.
Great. Just double checking. Okay, thank you, Andrea. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, directors. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I'll plan to keep my comments brief, but of course happy to dive into any questions, any details. Next slide, please. So first, to refresh your memory, this item is about the so-called resilience RFP. We released an RFP last November jointly with 2 other CCAs and then also a municipal utility. So that was with East Bay Community Energy, Peninsula Clean Energy, and then the City of Santa Clara, Silicon Valley Power. This RFP was in response to PG&E's Public Safety Power Shutoffs, or PSPS events, to help support battery storage adoption for those customers seeking to enhance their resilience. So during those grid shutoffs, customers could then use the battery systems for backup power. But when the grid is under normal operation, these systems can be aggregated to form a virtual power plant or a cloud-based aggregation that moves in unison to provide grid services to SVCE. So specifically with this approach, what we were asking for with this RFP is resource adequacy. And so SVCE would be paying for capacity from the aggregations of these systems. And a primary goal of this program that's worth reiterating from prior discussions is to support decarbonized resilience, to avoid, help avoid a massive uptick in dirty diesel generators, which is exactly what was observed last fire season during PSPS events. So in response to this RFP, we got 19 proposals for a collective 36 bids, which was a very strong response. And after a rigorous evaluation process, we selected 2 vendors and entered into negotiations. Next slide, please. So those 2 vendors are Sunrun and for the residential sector, and then also NLX for the commercial sector. Over the past couple months, we've been working very diligently with these vendors, specifically on a data analysis exercise to refine our customer segmentation, our go-to-market plan, and then also negotiate the bid price and the bid volume, all of which would work its way into an RA contract. And so the plan was to also concurrently negotiate the full RA contract terms and conditions. However, all of the other CCAs and us were collaborating on the contract form, the so-called pro forma, and that has resulted in a little bit of a delay. As you might imagine, there have been some coordination challenges, significant coordination challenges, given the number of entities, the number of lawyers involved, and the pro forma wasn't complete until only around last month. So we're just now really starting the bulk of the negotiations. However, given all the progress made, we do expect to carry out an efficient negotiation process with these vendors. However, we just were not able to negotiate these contracts to substantial form in time for this board meeting today. So the board has a planned recess in July, which means the next opportunity would be August. And the delay in a couple months, on top of the delay given the late stage of getting the pro forma, does have some implications, which is why we're here. If we were to execute in August and launch the program in September, that's peak fire season. So there are going to be just fewer customers who will have had the opportunity, the chance to potentially install a battery system through this program in advance of the worst of fire season. So that means the program won't have as meaningful of an impact this year. There is also a federal investment tax credit that's scheduled to step down at the end of this year from 26% to 22%, which also erodes some value. And so maximizing sales this year would help to our customers capitalize on that federal incentive. And then fewer installations this year also puts pressure on what RA capacity these vendors could deliver under this program for our 2021 RA deadline. And so one vendor, for instance, believes that their RA commitment could be cut in half for the CPUC April forecast requirement if there's the additional 2-month delay. And so that's what we would be missing out on if there are further delays. So in an attempt to avoid that missed opportunity, but still retain rigorous board oversight, staff here we're requesting a delegation of authority to the executive committee to review, approve, and authorize the execution of the contracts with Sunrun and NLX for RA from customer-sited storage systems, and it would be at a cost not to exceed $10 million. The 2 contracts, as described in the staff report, they are currently under negotiation, but they would be brought forward to the executive committee in substantial form for their review. However, the delivery term of each would not exceed 10 years. The collective value we expect would be well within 10 million, and the resultant volume of RA would be at least 4 megawatts. So those are some kind of broad contours of what we're negotiating now. So this request in a draft form was brought to the executive committee for their input at their May 22nd meeting. And I think there was general support from the committee for moving quickly and for delegation of authority, but there were also a few alternative approaches that are listed in the staff report that were discussed and could also be considered. So I'll go ahead and stop there and let Girish add any additional comments he may like before jumping into questions.
No additional, well, we discussed this with the executive committee. No additional comments.
All right, so I will look to my fellow board members. We are going to start with George.
Well, let me just voice my support. I'm quite worried about the fire season coming up, and this looks like a prudent way to have us move quickly without having to cause a July meeting.
Always good to avoid a meeting in the middle of summer. Any other board members have questions? Let me double check with the public here. Any member of the public wish to comment on this item, please raise your virtual hand. If you're calling in on the phone, that would be *9. Hang on one second. Okay, we got Bruce.
Hello. So as I understand it, the next executive committee meeting is Friday, June 26th. So 16 days from now. And Amy, can you help us all understand what would happen after June 26th if the executive committee says, go ahead, full speed ahead? What are the steps that you would be taking, that the vendors would be taking in July to communicate this potential program to customers who might want to engage? How quickly could someone who did want to engage get the relevant equipment installed? I'm just a little bit in the dark about what would happen in July, August, and September of this year.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So thanks for that question, Bruce. Just one note, although the next exec committee meeting is the date that you had specified, the expectation is that it's going to take probably a bit longer to actually negotiate these contracts, but that it's relatively simpler to call an executive committee meeting within a short time frame, given the smaller number of folks whose schedules need to be synchronized. So I did want to clarify that it's likely would be towards the beginning of July. I would expect, however, we are in the middle of negotiation, so it is hard to predict. But going back to the question that you had, kind of what is entailed kind of in this program and kind of the co-marketing approach. So the co-marketing approach with both vendors is under negotiation currently, and the co-marketing plans would be included as attachments in the contract. And so when we bring those forward, in addition to the RA contract, there would be more detail about what is agreed upon. But various types of co-marketing options that were listed in the RFP that was issued in November could include, for instance, SVCE, sending out emails to customers notifying them that this program exists. We've done some email marketing in the past and explaining kind of how this program can help benefit a cleaner grid. That's an example that was listed in the RFP. On the C&I side, for instance, another example is, we obviously have a lot of strong relationships with larger customers, many of whom are cities. And so if there is a member agency that's interested in installing a solar and storage system, for instance, using the CRCR funds that were recently approved by the board, then we could help make a warm introduction to this vendor. We'd also, I think just generally speaking, would encourage all of our customers, if they're planning to install such a system, to get multiple quotes. Like, that's generally best practice. But that's another type of co-marketing option. We would also, of course, release a press release on this particular program, likely jointly with the other CCAs. Does this give you a little bit more of an idea of kind of what would be entailed? It would be a more comprehensive marketing plan, but the details are under negotiation. Does that help, Bruce?
Bruce, are you still there?
I'm still here. Am I still live? Yes,
Yes,
it
you
helps.
are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you, Bruce. Any other member of the public wish to comment on this item? We will check with our board clerk. Any comments come in to you?
No additional comments received.
All right, then back to us as a board. Nancy.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I'm ready with the motion.
Please.
I move to adopt the resolution delegating authority to the Executive Committee to review, approve, and authorize the executive contracts with Sunrun Inc. and NLX North America Inc. for resource adequacy from customer-sited storage systems that also provide community resilience.
Second.
All right, who is the second on that? Liz. Yeah, you said it so fast I couldn't figure it out. Okay, so Nancy's motion, Liz's second. Any further comments or discussion?
I'll just say that the board, the executive committee toyed with a July meeting and, weighed the pros and cons of asking the board for special authority. And we opted to ask for the special authority to expedite being able to announce this in a timely manner. And I hope that the limitations on this and the expediency required to take advantage of the program we've authorized previously will carry the day, and that the board will approve this.
Excellent, well said. And just a reminder, this is one of those unusual ideas that we had as an agency, and it's good to be responsive and flexible and creative in the market. So this is really great. And with that, we will turn to our clerk and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Smith?
Yes.
Gibbons?
Yes.
Sinks?
Aye.
Tovar?
Yes.
Fliger?
Yes.
Tyson?
Yes.
Rennie?
I think we can trust him, so I'll say yes.
Thank you. Montano?
Aye.
Elahi?
Yes.
Martinez Beltran. Sir Martinez Beltran. Thank you. Abe Koga.
Aye.
Ellenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you guys for the trust and faith, and thank you to staff for helping us move a very important and excellent program forward. Okay. Number 7 is a discussion on the decarbonization and grid innovation programs. And that's going to go back to Amy, right?
Yes, back to me. All right. Thank you very much. Good evening again to the chair and directors. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak. This is an informational programs update, and just for background, excuse me, this item was added in response to Director Sinks's request at the last board meeting. So we put together what is a highlight reel for you of some programs. But before we start, I did want to mention some important kind of caveats. First of all, the slide deck is not exhaustive. It doesn't cover all of our programs portfolio because we are doing a lot, a lot of really amazing work. And so there are several programs that we're not even touching on in this highlight reel, including, for instance, our streamlining community-wide electrification program that's ramping up now, our building decarb joint action plan that's in progress now that member agency staff and also our community leaders such as Bruce and James, if they're still on the line, have been very engaged with, and our heat pump water heater program, to name a few. With this deck, we did try to kind of shed a bit more light on some of the programs that we haven't covered as much, for instance, in the monthly CEO report. And then we also wanted to use this opportunity to touch on a couple more internal activities that we thought the board might find of interest. So with that caveat, the next slide is this one actually, the programs team. So I tried to create a slide to highlight the programs team, but I wasn't really able to eliminate anyone. So everyone across SVCE, everyone across the organization makes extremely critical contributions to program design, development, and implementation. And this actually is already out of date. We have new staff members added since this was taken. I will give shout outs throughout the presentation to highlight who from the team is working on different efforts, just to give you more visibility into that though as well.
Well, the first shout out goes to Hakone Gardens, where you took that picture in Saratoga.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. All right, next slide, please. So first, just to refresh your memory, especially for those board members who have joined more recently, I did want to provide a few context slides. And so we've spoken quite a bit already today on greenhouse gas emissions and climate targets. This chart is straight out of our decarb strategy and programs roadmap, and it shows our community-wide historical emissions and our modeled, our simulated emissions through 2030, along with the goals that the SVCE board adopted, as shown in the diamonds, for 2025 and 2030, as well as 2021. So there's a lot happening in this graph, so I'll just highlight that there are 3 primary emission sources in our communities: from the power sector, which is shown here in turquoise, transportation sector, which is shown in lighter blue, and then natural gas from appliances and buildings, which is shown there in orange. And as you can see, and as you all know, the dark turquoise bar in the stacked bar chart, it's gotten pretty small, and it's going to continue to decrease. The state, we as an organization in the state have very aggressive clean electricity goals. The 2 other sectors that are potentially pretty tricky to tackle are the transportation and natural gas sectors. Okay, next slide, please. Also, as described in the decarb strategy, but to refresh your memory, the overarching approach that we're taking to achieve our climate targets, and this is of course extremely simplified, but it's 3 steps: procure and maintain a sustainable, affordable, and carbon-free power supply. Step 2 is electrify everything, the built environment and mobility. And then the third step is to promote energy efficiency and successful grid integration. So our programs portfolio includes programs that touch each of these different sectors shown in this Venn diagram. And then we also have, if you recall, 2 cross-sector program focus areas, innovation and education and outreach. And so the highlight reel will touch on all of these. All right, next slide, please. So without further ado, this is the highlight reel now. So first up, C&I Clean Power Offerings. And this is being led by Don and Monica and Peyton, Rebecca, and Eric. And the purpose of this program is to develop and deliver really innovative power offerings to our large C&I customers who want clean energy that may have some special requirements. And there are 3 offerings that are in various stages of development with customers. One of them is the EcoInvest discount. Shout out to Poonam, who came up with the name, which is a co-investment arrangement to help spur effectively demonstration electrification projects and clean energy projects at C&I customer premises. The next one, Green Prime Direct, and this is a product to deliver a dedicated renewable resource to a customer. And then we also have a product called Green Prime 24/7, which is an hourly load matching carbon-free product. And the heat map shown here is from an analysis for Green Prime 24/7, which shows for 2021 all the way through to 2030 for a representative day in each month, the matching of load with supply on an hourly basis from midnight to evening. And so from this heat map, when it's yellow, there's a surplus of carbon-free electricity. And then when it's red, there's a deficit. And when it's green, that's when it's perfectly matched. Next slide. On the building side, we're in the final stages of carrying out a buildings baseline study. And this is being led by Rebecca with support from Freya. The study characterizes energy and emissions in the built environment across our service territory and is being used to inform as one component of the information that we're collecting for our Building Decarb Joint Action Plan. And this chart is from that study. It's quickly become everyone's favorite. It's a so-called Sankey diagram of emissions. So the units that you see here, they're metric tons of CO2 emissions. So on the very left are emissions by fuel source, electricity or gas, as measured at the customer meter. Then they're disaggregated in the middle by sector. And as you can see there, commercial and residential buildings largely contribute equally to emissions. And then they're disaggregated further on the very right-hand side by end use. So the 2 largest contributors responsible for emissions are from space and water heating from natural gas appliances. Next slide, please. So I think that Sankey diagram kind of nicely crystallizes where we are today as far as kind of the emissions profile in our buildings. But to address emissions in the built environment, it's helpful to have a vision of where we want to be. And that vision is our future fit home. And so this is a vision that we're working towards. And I think many of you have probably seen this graphic. It's included in a variety of different education outreach materials that we have, but it's an all-electric home with all-electric appliances, induction, heat pumps, EV chargers, there's solar plus storage, and then also there's intelligent control that ties everything together and enables the home to manage load on site and also to respond to price signals and the grid. And so that's the vision. Next slide, please. So the REACH Code effort was our major buildings focused program in 2019 to get us from, the Sankey diagram that you saw before to that vision of a future fit home. And that effort is continuing into 2020. And so I think, as you all know, that's led from the SVCE side by John with support from a lot of folks here. And 9 of our 13 member agencies have adopted REACH codes, thanks to your leadership. And these codes will have a tremendous impact on emissions and the market transformation that needs to happen in our communities. But I'd also point out the impact isn't limited to being local. The state is already working on the baseline code for the next building code cycle. And as some of you may know, REACH codes such as this have a strong influence on future statewide codes, and also on the level of ambition that we might be seeing at the state level. So we'll see how that statewide code develops. Next slide, please. So the REACH code effort is critical for making progress in our building emissions, and it's also really helping us to enable the development of a bunch of future fit homes, which when taken together, we could describe as a future fit community. Next slide. So smart homes and buildings, homes of the future and some homes of today, are connected and controllable and able to provide grid services through a so-called virtual power plant, this cloud-based aggregation of smart loads. And this is our virtual power plant program at SVCE is a priority program identified in the roadmap. Next slide, please. And the way that we're approaching it, our development of this VPP, so-called virtual power plant VPP program, is effectively through a pilot roadmap. So if we go back here to our future fit home, next slide, please. Our first VPP pilot really is focused on this component, the solar plus battery storage component. And given we covered this in the last item, I won't spend more time talking about it, but in this case, we're aggregating behind the meter solar plus storage systems to provide those grid services. And I think I did forget to mention in the last item some of the folks involved in this. Lots of work, lots of leadership and effort from Justin, Rebecca, Eric, and of course, Monica and Don are all playing a very large role in this program. Next slide, please. Then the second pilot in our VPP pilot roadmap is a telematics smart charging pilot, which is in development now. And this is one of the 4 pilots that was selected from the last application round of our Innovation On-Ramp program. So this pilot, the last pilot was focused on solar plus storage. This one is focused on EV charging. Since charging at a home can easily double a household load, and it just offers tremendous potential for demand flexibility, which can benefit both the participants in this program, our customers, and also all of SVC customers by lowering overall system costs and emissions. And so this pilot is in development and would be scheduled to launch in the fall timeframe. Next slide, please. So these 2 pilots will provide really significant value, we think, to our customers and community. We, of course, have evaluation plans developed or in development for both of them. And they're going to be foundational, but we do have our sights set on going further and really achieving this future fit community. And so here are kind of some of the potential next steps that are under consideration for a pilot roadmap. One is managed heat pump water heater fleet through our future fit heat pump water heater program. But eventually we do want that kind of whole home connected community approach and a comprehensive platform that's agnostic to specific vendors and end uses. So that's kind of the VPP vision. Next slide, please. So returning to EVs, the board adopted our EV infrastructure and joint action plan in fall of last year. And these were the 5 activity areas that were prioritized in that plan. Regional collaboration, awards for best practices, incentives, pilot projects, and education and technical support. And the EV infrastructure activities are led by Don, Justin, and Zoe. Next slide, please. So we could easily spend an hour or hours really on everything that's happening on the EV side, because there's a lot of amazing things happening there. We boiled it down to 2 highlights for this highlight reel. One of them is regional collaboration. Excuse me. As of December of last year, we started organizing quarterly meetings with a growing stakeholder group of city staff or member agency staff, industry actors, regional peers, among other stakeholders. And through this group, we're really focused on identifying and resolving barriers, such as long and confusing interconnection or permitting processes, but it's also a forum for jointly working together to help bring more external funding to the region. And then on the next slide, the other highlight for the EVI programs is under education and technical support. So we're providing technical assistance, concierge level support for multifamily and small and medium businesses, which would include local governments. So these are sectors that have historically had lower levels of EV charger deployment, generally speaking, because of a variety of barriers. And the interest list for this program is currently open, and the full launch is right around the corner in August. Next slide, please. So under the education and outreach program focus area, the main program that we've been working hard to develop is the Customer Resource Center, which is a website to provide tools for the community to learn about, to see the value of, and take action to transition to electric vehicles, heat pump appliances, as well as solar and storage. And so some board members may recall this, but this initiative really has a lot of roots all the way back to the CPAG, our Customer Program Advisory Group, that was formed to provide input on the program's portfolio that was included in the decarb program's roadmap. And so they had provided a lot of foundational input and ideas that have really been baked into our approach for this program. And James, if he's still on the line, was one of the members of the CPAG who had provided a lot of thoughtful input there. So the public-facing name for this website will be the eHub, since Customer Resource Center is apparently too dry, and it will be launched in late June. So this is led by Dawn and Pam and Beth and Colleen. On slide 19, the next slide, please. So I realize I'm probably over time here, so I'll be brief. This is led by Rebecca. We're doing a lot of work internally to be a data smart organization. I would say that's true across the entire SVCE organization. It doesn't only apply to programs by any means. And that includes, on the program side at least, helping to establish a data analytics platform as depicted here in this mock-up. For instance, to help address ad hoc queries and to carry out those ad hoc queries all the way to carrying out very involved strategic analyses, such as the building's baseline study. So we have an initial version of this platform that's launched and several updates in progress. So this platform is really helping us to support data-based decision-making as an organization. Next slide, please. And then the final highlight that we've included here, this is an effort led by Freya, an equity analysis. And I think it relates to the chair's opening comments. And so we're kind of coming full circle here. There are 3 different categories of activities that we're focused on when we're thinking about trying to analyze equity in service across SVCE. The first one is tools. So what are tools that could help us think about and incorporate an equity lens into our programmatic work? So we're updating our data analytics platform to include equity-related data and metrics, such as socioeconomic indicators at the census tract level, as well as looking into excuse me, an automated reporting pipeline and team education materials. The second area of this analysis is focused on process. So we're looking into the development of recommendations for the systematized use of tools in our program design processes. Then the third category is kind of dedicated analyses. For instance, analyzing geographic distribution of care-fair customers and EV adoption or distributed energy resource adoption, and housing profiles by community socioeconomic status at the census tract level. Next slide, please. So this work is in progress, but we did include a couple maps here just as an illustration. So these are two equity indicators that we're looking into that are part of the overarching analysis that we're carrying out. So we're looking for descriptive metrics that can capture community characteristics describing vulnerability and barriers to access. Next slide. Okay, so that's the highlight reel that we prepared. To just reiterate some comments from the beginning, this is not exhaustive, and I'm sure I missed some shout outs, so I apologize to team members about that. So it didn't touch on several programs in the portfolio, and I know that the ones we did touch on, we only gave you a brief taste, but hopefully this was helpful. And I also wanted to just include a reminder. We do provide regular programs updates to the board in two places currently, in the monthly CEO report, and then on a quarterly basis as an informational update to the board. But if you happen to have any suggestions for how to improve those or other ideas for how we could communicate our programs activities, we'd of course welcome that feedback. So just on behalf of the programs team, thanks for your attention, and we'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Amy. Leaves some of us wanting to see the whole movie, but we don't have time. George has questions, and then Rod.
Yes, I'll be quick. Thank you, Amy. That was a really nice presentation, really well presented, and just so content rich. My head is spinning. But I have a different favorite slide. Mine is slide 5, which showed the heat map, and it showed areas of energy surplus and deficit. And I couldn't tell in 2029, is it net? What's the net? Is it balanced, or is it still a deficit?
Yeah, so for this particular slide, yeah, I think that's the one you're referring to there. So for this particular slide, it's looking at a particular customer load and a specific set of resources. So just so you know, so this isn't SVCE wide, although we've kind of created similar ones for the purposes of internalizing our own thinking as it relates to the IRP. But sorry, going back to your question. So the legend of the heat map is at the very bottom. So the yellow is referring to when there's a surplus of carbon-free energy based on the resource portfolio that's modeled there. And then there's a deficit when it's red. And for this portfolio, kind of what's happening in the background, if I recall all the details of the specific one, there are some additional solar resources being added, which is why you're seeing the yellow parts kind of increase in intensity because there's more and more solar being added. But the red is, reflecting the fact that it isn't matched to the load on on an hourly basis. So in order to actually offer an hourly matched product, we would need to effectively construct a resource portfolio that had that filled in more during those times, so potentially including a wind or a geothermal resource. And so it's a very iterative process, and this is kind of in the middle of one of the iterations. Does that answer your question?
We need some wind resource.
Geothermal. We all have our favorite. All right. Rod?
Thank you so much. I'll start by saying I hope that directors found this information informative. I certainly did, and think it's important for us to have a good working knowledge to be able to draw attention to these programs in the many other conversations we have in our public lives. And I'm grateful to Amy and her team, to Don and his team, and actually, it's the whole agency, right? It's Don Eckert's team as well. It's Monica and her team that are working on this, as well as Hillary. And so I'm grateful for this update. I had one particular question, and that is on the initiative to help bring solar plus storage to homeowners, smaller facilities, not the C&I business. Is there a program that might help us focus on both resiliency and time delay, some storage, in other words, for individual residences for those who already have solar installations, right? And what I'm thinking is although there's certainly many more rooftops to go in Silicon Valley, actually, as we drive solar up, right, we were looking for solar with that buffer battery to delay from when the solar is acquired until when it's used. And I'm just wondering if we have a program focused on a battery storage for those who already have a solar installed on a rooftop today. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So for at least the program that's under development with Sunrun and NLX, what they could do, so it's largely focused on new installations, but they could and are planning to incorporate, they are planning to incorporate existing customers. However, they are existing Sunrun customers and existing NLX customers, because in order to deliver the capacity, they need to have control over the operation of the battery. And so they need to be the ones in charge of that operating agreement. So that certainly is a limitation of this specific program in that it doesn't, it's not vendor agnostic and kind of technology agnostic and kind of capture all the deployment that does exist. But that's been very much on our minds. And we do consider, this version of the program to be a pilot. We're learning a lot, including some of the limitations of this approach. And so there are other approaches that could help, get around this that we're in the process of considering. So yeah, there are a couple options that could kind of fall under the VPP program's umbrella that could be like a bring your own battery type of a model, or bring your own device, whether it's a battery or a smart EV charger or thermostat or what have you. There are more kind of vendor and technology agnostic models out there. And I think that's certainly the direction that we want to go to enable access.
I would encourage you to really look into that. I think, the idea of demand side management, peak demand, time of day shift and so forth, ought to be a big deal, and we ought to have a vendor agnostic solution. But I will simply end by saying that I think the work we've done, the work we did last year on encouraging our member cities to pass REACH codes we are now leaders, I think, and I'm trying to socialize this at the Air District so that more cities across our 9 counties will adopt these things. And I think this program and many of our other programs really are setting the way. Another one I would simply highlight is our initiative to work to get EV charging in multifamily housing. I think that's just critical to getting equity, allowing folks who are renting to have the opportunity that the rest of us have to make a difference on climate by electing an EV. So thank you for all your efforts to the entire group.
All right, thanks, Rod. Let me see if there's any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item. If anybody wishes to speak, please raise your virtual hand. And if you're on the phone, that would be *9. And we have the other Bruce.
Yes. I want to thank the entire team for all the good work that came to this point. I mean, I heard all these compliments coming through that are all very true. And I think the team has done a lot, and we have a lot to be thankful for in regards to that. I do have one question from something I've seen a lot of, and that is the fact that there's an educational component that you put out there for a number of the programs, and that's very important. I mean, the concern I have is we have a lot of contractors that have decided they just want to go do the old thing, and we have to educate and pull them out and move them to this new paradigm. And that includes the ones on major buildings and multifamily as well as single family. And so we need to work on those items to make sure that indeed we have that. The other question I have is in regards to the what you're doing with the EVs in multifamily buildings. Because while it is much more cost effective to do it at the time of build, we still need it at the other end, but we do need, you know, we're running into situations now where we've got the reach cords in place. We're starting to see buildings come through with programs, you know, to release a project. And if there was some way that some funds for that could happen, we might get into more of the low income families where there's a real issue. There are cost caps on a per unit basis. And if we could do something to supply the EV charging, I think it would help. Thanks again for all the good work you guys are doing.
Thanks, Bruce. Is there any other member of the public that wishes to comment? Let me check with our board clerk. Did we receive any other comments?
No comments received.
All right, and back to us, Liz.
Thank you. Good presentation. Always get excited about the discussion of our program. So thanks a lot to everybody. I wanted to mention that I took the Haas classes, and one of the programs was on equity analysis. So I would recommend that staff take a look at that presentation. It was interesting because it had a critique of the paper that was being presented. And I think staff would find that informative. And the second is the socio-equity maps. MTC ABAG produces or utilizes maps of equity produced by the Housing Department of California, HCD, whatever it stands for. And those maps are very informative, and I can share with you a link so you can see how they might compare with the maps of your assumptions as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, Vaughn, where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to echo some of the comments on the equity. I think it's great. Rod mentioned it, Liz mentioned it, but I also think that with the reach codes, we've given an opportunity to have electric utilities and some of our new rentals for families to have that choice as well as an option to use all electric and know that they're contributing to reducing carbon emissions. And while we know it's really expensive to do the built environment, by getting that included in new buildings, I just think we've, clearly that wouldn't have happened without our leadership. And so I absolutely want to thank the staff and all of you, all of our colleagues. I think we're definitely, I'm so proud to be part of this organization. I also wondered, with all of and looking at some of the presentations that were given and seeing what a big chunk we have to go in transportation. And with so much of our staff and our organization, SVCE, working from home, if we could be a leader that way and, showing, yes, lots of organizations are doing it now, but it seems like we have an appetite for committing to that and moving forward, and we're not in the tech industry. And so I think that maybe we can be a leader there as well, and showing, the success that we've had with our team working from home and how that has contributed to reducing carbon emissions and what that might mean for the future. And I think that might be an opportunity for us again to continue going about being a leader.
Excellent. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this item? Seeing none, this was just a a discussion for the update. And I want to thank staff, which means we're thanking every single person in the organization, which is exactly why we've hired everybody, because we really are trying to change the world, and we are trying to get this right. Thank you, Amy, and thank Girish and everybody else in the organization for all that you're doing to help these programs move forward. Okay, so that's it for this item. Next up would be board member announcements or future agenda items. Are there any that anybody would like to announce?
Liz?
Liz? Yeah, go ahead.
So I just did want to come back to the fact that I took the Haas classes. There were 6 of them, two a session over 3 different weeks. Frankly, they were a lot over my head. I understood them when I was listening to them, but to be able to tell you what I heard, I'm not sure I could do. I found it very interesting just to understand how the energy market and theoreticians about how energy should be handled and produced was very interesting. So I thank SVCA for Silicon Valley Clean Energy for allowing me that opportunity. The second, and I have sent this to Girish this evening, and it is allowed to be shared. The Boston Society of Architects is holding a 14-week class, 1 hour every Monday, and it's on the decarbonization of the material that you put into buildings. And I can only tell you, it is absolutely fascinating. And I would encourage everyone. I've watched, they've only had 2 lessons so far. They have got more acronyms than we have, so that'll give you a start. Fascinating how to understand how carbon is produced as you go through the life cycle of producing, transporting, and building, never mind operating buildings. An excellent presentation. So I'm passing it along to encourage everybody to take a look at it. Fits right into a lot of the presentations we've had this evening. So I hope you find it as interesting as I did.
Excellent. Any other announcements or future agenda items? Seeing none, next up is our closed session. So before we go into closed session, and there's a whole procedure for that, first I need to look to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on our closed session item? If you wish to do so, please raise your virtual hand, and if you're on the phone, press *9. So I am seeing none. I will look to our board clerk. Were there any other communications on closed session?
No public comment received.
Okay, this is a little awkward in the digital forum, but we're going to have to kick everybody off the Zoom call, but we're going to need to set a time certain that we will become public again for any report out. And based on what we need to do, I'm proposing we set that time to be 10:30, which should give us about 1 hour and 15 minutes of real discussion. And if you're a member of the public, you'll need to drop off the call now and come back at 10:30 if you want to see our report out. And if you are a member of the staff, you will also be dropping off of the call. And we should be left, when all the dust settles, with our attorney, our consultant, and all of the board members. That includes the support staff that runs the Zoom meeting, so they're supposed to leave it in my able-bodied hands. So okay, at this point, we have provided two minutes for our members of the public to show back up. And We have just completed our closed session item, and we have, we took no reportable, I am reporting that we took no reportable actions. That's the way to say that. And the next thing up on this, this agenda is to adjourn the meeting. So we'll call the meeting adjourned. I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. And everybody have a good summer.